the various ways in which corruption manifests in the country would be in private and also in the public sector. But even in the public sector, there is always an involvement of the private sector in that particular corruption. If you look at all types of corruption, it would not be a public official doing corruption with another public official or a public company. It would be a public official being corrupted and having to pay off some, or give off some certain contracts to a private company.
We have laws and keep developing and sharpening those laws that should prevent illicit financial flows out of our country. But more importantly, the more forward-looking part of this whole question is about setting up a sovereign wealth fund.
So corporate corruption is very, very big in South Africa. We have different forms of corporate corruption. So if you look at multinational companies or big business within the mining sector, for example, corporate corruption there takes the form of kind of undue influence, paying bribes to government to push through policies in their favor, pay workers lower wages to get away with bad working conditions. These are like impacts that directly affect on workers' conditions.
Corruption is the worst cancer in our society, especially from an African perspective, because it affects the poorest. The resources that are meant to be empowering our people, empowering the community, they go to one sort of source, which it becomes overly selfish.
I believe that South Africa would be better if the people who are in power were forced to use public services.
There's obviously also job scarcity, where you'd find probably companies will hire one person to do like 5 different jobs instead of actually getting 5 people. So then the rest of us then don't get jobs and we become unemployed.
So one of the things about mining in general is that by nature, it's generally export-based, trade-based. It involves the movement of goods from one country to another. It's also dominated by large multinational corporations across the world. The largest companies will be multinational corporations. And this opens up quite a few avenues for profit shifting. It opens up the ability of companies to maybe falsely declare the amount of goods that they're exporting, the value of minerals that they're exporting. And it also allows these large companies to take advantage of the fact that they already have structures across borders and they have an immense amount of wealth. So they can easily set up different branches in tax havens and jurisdictions around the world.
If you think about some of the evidence coming out of the Zondo Commission about how our banking sector failed to exercise due diligence in order to say, who are these individuals who are opening up bank accounts to gather the proceeds of illicit activity to then siphon this money outside of South Africa's borders. So banks have got a responsibility to do something called know who your customer is. So they're supposed to, at the point at which somebody opens a bank account, to say, who is this person and are they what would be called politically exposed? So do they sort of present some type of risk which should cause a bank to then raise a flag to say, is this a suspicious transaction? What we also see in South Africa, but also globally, is that you've got other actors such as lawyers and accountants who are very much part of this network of enabling these types of corruption risks or illicit financial flows.
Look, I think there's elements within government that are trying, but it's not enough. So part of and I think that state capture really kind of is an example of the wide range in ways of which corruption manifests and takes place. Number one, it's really the question of protection of whistleblowers, and we've seen whistleblowers being murdered. We've seen whistleblowers being kind of losing their jobs when raising questions. So the protection of whistleblowers is one thing that I think government really can do strongly. Secondly, they need to kind of increase and put more resources into, for example, SARS and other departments that really are trying to say, to track and do the kind of following the money trail, and doing the investigations. But also I think that we do need to act stronger on both individuals and companies engaged in illicit financial flows.
So when these companies shift profits, it means that they are removing money first away from being taxed, which would have contributed to provision of public services and goods, but at the same time they're also shifting money which could have been factored into wage negotiations. And workers who currently are earning meager wages, we're having 75% of the working force in the country earning less than 5,800. That means you are depriving this 75% of the workforce in the country from claiming their share in those spoils which would have been made by that particular company. So in this instance, you are widening the gap of income inequality, but at the same time, because inequality and poverty and even unemployment go together, you are also worsening the conditions of poverty in the country.